Great to be here, everyone. My name is Amy King, and I am a co-founder, I'm a business psychologist, and I'm the CEO of People Matter. And we really specialize in bringing together the latest understanding of human psychology with data and technology to eradicate workplace burnout. And ultimately, my vision for this is that we create healthier, more sustainable workplace cultures. And part of that is from my own direct experience. I spent the first 7 years of my career working my socks off and eventually burnt out. And my focus for my clients was actually around how you apply psychology to realize potential of people, the talent side. And from going through my experience and being through a psychologist, the kind of irony of my experience was realizing I was putting all this energy and effort into talent, but then realizing that so many of us are guilty of, for ourselves or in our workplaces, running our people to the ground, not on purpose, but ultimately not realizing talent because of the burnout issue. And if you think about modern day technology and the always-on world that we find ourselves, complexity, more and more of us are now finding ourselves exhausted and frankly lonely. And this is a problem that we are all starting to see. Organizations are jumping into action, and it's great to see more resources being made available. But the paradox is, despite that, we're seeing a gap. The minority of us are actually not feeling supported with our mental well-being at work. So why is that? And we're going to start exploring that together today. So when you look at the role of the advisor, and you look at the data available of their experience, 87% identify with being stressed or very stressed, and 50% report feeling emotionally drained by the end of every single day. And this is research from Cornell University across 8 different organizations covering hundreds of people. So if you take a step back and look at the well-being spectrum, really what we're saying is your brand ambassadors, the people who are at the forefront of every touch point for your customer, are in this stress zone. They're in survival mode trying to make it work. And the same report highlights that around about 4 to 8% of agents are in this low stress zone. And that seems like a bit of a problem. And why is that? And the truth is, the role of an agent is a really tough gig. We've now got automation, which is great. There's more load being taken off, but there's also more disruption, more uncertainty, more emotional intelligence needed to navigate through those calls that can be really tough. And if you speak to an agent, everyone has a story. These are real examples, just little snippets around how it feels. I only spoke to my brother last week, who's working at a contact center, who said one of his mates in his 20s at the end of the day broke down and cried because they had been really feeling the emotional intensity of the calls. And the one that really gets me is this one at the end, which is someone can speak to you and say, I know this isn't your fault, but, and logically you can tell yourself, this isn't my fault. But when you've got that experience of someone's got a problem and they're expecting of you so much, it can be a whole different story. And the reason for that is we are hardwired in our brains to care about the social and emotional interactions with other people. We are social beings. And this goes for everyone in every role. So in a given day, you've got lots of triggers, events, changes, things happening. And our brain is very basic in that it's looking, it's kind of the old part of our brain at the back here, it's looking for any kind of threat that could start to get in the way. And it doesn't see social threats, the emotional threat, any different to a physical threat where it could actually harm us. It doesn't know the difference. The other side is reward, which is where we get the dopamine hit and feel good. So this is very useful. I mean, coming up today, my lizard brain knows this is a bit stressful coming up on stage, and it's kicking me into action to focus and show up and do a good job. But where it starts to go wrong is if stress is continuous and you don't get that break to recover and get back to normal. And we call that the doom loop. So in a contact center environment, you may get a call. The customer is unhappy. You're trying to make it better. You're not getting the result that you wanted. They're still pushing at you. You put more energy in, more stress, panic, this isn't working. And you may even have a system that's telling you you're on the call too long, or you've got a backup of calls. So you've got accumulation of stress building on your day. So this doom loop goes round, and the continuous stress can start to fatigue our system. And for an agent, that is back-to-back. Breaks are minimal, and you're having to switch between one person's world all the way to another person's world without really time to recover. So the more you expend energy, the more you start to overwork, the more you start to feel fatigued. The more fatigued you feel, the less resources you have to deal with the next customer. I think it was Martin who I spoke to earlier, which is by the time you get to the 8th hour of that day, your energy is expended. It's tough. So this can lead to burnout. Burnout's become a bit of a buzzword, but ultimately it occurs when your demands exceed your ability to cope. It's a state of chronic stress. It's a state of exhaustion. Stress can be good. It allows us to perform. But if you do not manage stress effectively, if you're not creating conditions for people to be successful, it can quickly turn into something else. Now, just extremely briefly, I won't cover this in too much detail. The 3 signs of burnout, to bring this to life further, is exhaustion. Feeling irritable, tired, nothing left in the tank. You might find you're being more reactive. It's also detachment. It's become so stressful that actually you're showing up, but you're not really there. You're going through the motions, and you're having to withdraw because that's now the new coping mechanism to your stressful event. And then finally, there's hopelessness, that sense of you're working really hard, showing up, trying to make things work, but you just don't feel like you're getting anywhere. So you start to get this sense of not feeling effective. And there's a human cost to this that's very real. I speak to many people in many organizations around burnout as a whole. And actually, as you start to talk about it, there's stuff in there that will probably resonate with many of you. And it does lead to, within the contact center world, a real human cost and need for medication that is higher than the average across industries. Within the Cornell University report that I talked about earlier, they also looked at what the business impact is to your operation. So for the high stress group, which is the 87% who report feeling highly stressed, they tend to see about on average 10% absence rates compared to the low stress group. So immediately that creates more of a problem to running your business. The second side to this is, obviously, it's not much fun being stressed continuously, so you start to think, do I want to do this anymore? And you start to plan other options, and you start to think about what you may do other than this. So 44% of the high stress group are planning to leave at any given point in time, and ultimately the low stress group is a lot lower. So attrition then becomes the problem and adds to the operational strain and stress to making things work. Within the UK, mental health as a whole is estimated to cost $45 billion a year to the UK economy due to presenteeism, absenteeism, and attrition. Purely mental health, anxiety, stress, depression. So what's really going on here? Why is this happening? First thing to say is this is not about people just overworking or working too hard, and it's not about people not just being able to hack it. They're not cut for the job. There's a lot more to this in terms of how we're wired in our brains, the environments that we're creating, and the nature of work, particularly in the service industry, where you are there representing a brand, building empathy, trying to listen and solve problems. That's a huge demand that you're asking of people. So the first part then of why this happens is the high demand side of the role. We only have so much energy in a given day. So if you imagine a bucket, and that bucket, every time you get a demand, a call, a decision, any number of things that can affect your day and make you feel stressed, is a drop of water. Perhaps it's a gush. And that's filling up throughout the day to the point where it's going to fill up and it's going to topple over. So high demands, there's only so much that we can take in a given day. Now, within the contact center world, these are all factors that contribute to burnout risk. And they're all very real demands that you will hopefully recognize within your own organizations and environments. So a few of these that I'll pick out then. So emotional labor. This is the idea that we are emotionally having to engage with everyone day to day that we talk to. And so I've worked in the service industry, and I can tell you it takes a lot of energy to show up and obviously to deliver great service. You have to put your game face on. You have to smile, you have to be friendly, you have to not react when someone's screaming at you. And that can actually create something called emotional dissonance. So it's the idea that you are presenting yourself one way. I feel great, I look great, I'm trying to make you feel good, customer. But inside, I'm really stressed and I'm not okay, but I can't share that and I've got to keep that within my day. And that dissonance is a demand in itself. It's shown to directly relate to poor mental health. Obviously, I mean, I won't go through all of these, but there is abuse, threats that people get, people are back to back, lots of shift patterns, constant monitoring. So the majority of contact center staff feel it's used for disciplinary reasons, when in fact, when it's used for development purposes, mental health improves and stress is reduced. But most see it as purely performance monitoring. And of course, the more that you are in the situation of attrition burning through, more overtime is offered, people want the time. You then start to create a self-perpetuating cycle where people then burn out, people then are offered more time, etc. So the demands are high. So first question for you guys, just with looking at this, is how many of these resonate with you today within your organization? And do you see the pressures being healthy, so manageable? Or are you seeing these signs and these noises that perhaps there's a risk and it could be impacting your people? The other side then isn't just the demand and the energy being asked of your agents, particularly with today's world of all the disruption and the automation, the complexity now that agents are being asked to deliver on. It's the need for support. And support's needed more than ever. Disregarding COVID for a moment, the type of queries and the time it's taking to really get to the bottom of things when you are dealing with someone is a lot harder, and you need training, you need knowledge, and you need to feel confident, and you need support from your peers. So again, these are risk factors of burnout and poor mental well-being. So lack of training is a big one, unclear expectations, autonomy is huge, so do you provide agents with the ability to make decisions and to help counter issues when that's made? I've had brilliant examples of where this is now coming in more and more to help solve customer problems. It can also be about technology. So the amazing thing about being here today is hearing the innovation. And as James quite rightly said, it's really exciting because actually it provides a scalable way to start to make it easier and offload some of the demands from agents. But the social and emotional aspect is still something that needs to be considered. So these are just a few examples, and it kind of leads me to the question, and for us to ask ourselves, have we lost sight of the human that's at the forefront of our business every day, serving our customers? Someone this morning said that great employee experience will equal great customer experience. So what are we doing about it? How can we do more? And it's almost, if we don't think about this question, it's almost by design, by accident or ignorance, whatever way you want to look at it, that we will find our people set up to fail, and we will make things harder for ourselves in our businesses, which is the demands are high and risky, and there's a lack of support, and therefore people end up in this survival zone of just trying to keep things going. The utopia, and this is where we're, as an industry, needing to move to, is this flow zone, where people are empowered, enabled, technology is doing its job, and people are able to deliver their very best within reason every day. So what are the challenges that we start to need to be able to address to overcome this? So the first one that we see is there's a huge blind spot today. There is so much data. Often it's performance focused, productivity focused, customer focused, fantastic. And that kind of tells you part of the story in terms of how things are going. In the people space, we're probably all fairly familiar with engagement surveys and checking in to see how people are doing, maybe a pulse survey on well-being, but really that's only one small slice of the puzzle. It's not telling you about the environment, how people are experiencing those demands, and the level of support that people have and have needed in order to kind of get through this. So there's a need to be able to take a more 360 view, a bigger picture of the risks and the environments that we're creating for our people to thrive, not just wait for the well-being survey to say people are struggling. The other challenge is measurement is often just a snapshot in time. And this is a shift in the people space as a whole. It's often been very survey-led. We're going to ask you once a year, maybe once a month at best. So you just kind of get the in-the-moment view, rather than knowing, is this a systemic issue? Is this always there? To be able to really say, we're going to put some resources behind this to do something about it. And the third issue is really around the link between data to action. And we hear about this across all industries, but it is the hardest part. On this top line here, we've got data, signals, things that you can pick up. In the mental well-being space, we've got an amazing opportunity now to look at digital signals of how healthy work environments are, shift patterns. It could be the intensity of work and how quickly things are happening. There's a lot of data that sheds a lens on how work gets done and the rest periods that people might need to do a better job. There's also data and signals that you can look at through surveys and through subjective measures. So that's really the first question, which is, well, what are you measuring to raise that top line? But then the second question, and where often it falls down, is does the insight lead to something tangible as an action? And this isn't a HR job. This is everyone's job. This is about how do we provide tools to managers to be able to know how it's feeling on the floor, particularly remotely. How do we change the conversation? Or perhaps it could be looking at your resource and operational model to actually look at how work gets allocated. It could also be technology. So without looking at those challenges, there's no surprise that we're in this zone of the minority are feeling not supported, because ultimately our environments are contributing to how we're feeling. Yoga and just meditation apps are not going to be the solve. They help because they're ways of coping. We need to look more fundamentally about what's going on so we can address the true need of people. And as Einstein said, insanity is this idea that we do the same thing over and over again and expect a different result. And I've spent time talking to many people in this industry, and the common story is attrition is a major issue, and it has been for years. So you hire, you're there working through the environment, you get absence, you offer overtime. The overtime means people then start overworking. You start finding you've got more stress and absence again. People leave, rinse, repeat. And this is not because we don't have data on performance and productivity. It's not because we don't have a strong focus on customer experience even today. There is a missing piece of the puzzle around how we enable agents and how we think about really what's realistic for them and how we create a great experience for them to do a great job. So we need to change this. A shift is needed. So let's move away from just pushing agents to their limits and then hiring again and doing it all over again, and you're feeling that pain every day, to something far more systematic. We have technology now, and there's ways of gaining insights to these different markers and clues and signals of how it's feeling that are predictors of things that could be an issue or could be an opportunity to your businesses. So really that's three things. One is insight, and this is people insight on how things are working in your culture. It's moving beyond just how people are feeling. Do you feel stressed? How healthy do you feel? The well-being questions. We need to look at the behavioural markers. Is there healthy work-life balance? Are you seeing the right role model behaviours from managers and leaders? Or are they sending emails at odd times and putting people under pressure at points in which it doesn't really feel appropriate? Is that the norm? So behaviour is really around switching off, boundaries, role modelling, etc., managing workload. But we also need to look at the environment. Like I said, I picked on demands on the support side, but it's really taking a read on, is this culture sustainable? Can we do this over and over again? And is this the best it can be? And how do we start to unpack that further? If we start to get that view, we can then start to say, we're not going to just react to when there's a problem. We're going to start being more proactive, and we're going to start creating a great place to work, and we're going to create an environment where people can do their best work themselves. And then finally, it's about the action and moving it from just knee-jerkitis and the one-hit wonder, and then that's ticking the box, done, to something that is embedded to your culture in how people think, how people to support, and how things get acted upon. So management for managers and leaders, is about behaviour, so training and support to kind of shift the attitudes, and it's also about doing this systematically, ongoing over time. So all in all, this space is extremely exciting at the moment, and it is also extremely challenging. I came into this space simply because there is opportunity, and there's also a lot that needs to be done, and we're only at the beginning of it. COVID has woken us up to the need to recognise it, which is fantastic. And the good news is there is technology now, there are platforms, and there are ways to gather this data and insight to make a difference. And I'm extremely honoured to be here today because it's with Sabio that we've started that journey already to partner and to start to look at the ways in which data and insight can join up to the customer experience. How do we start to see how employees feel could directly impact the customer experience? How do we start to see how this all joins up? So it's really that final thought just to leave you on, which is thank you. And please do think carefully about that culture that you are creating for your environment, for your agents, sorry. And yeah, thank you for having me, everyone. Fantastic to be here.